All right, so let's talk about our first news topic here, which is Peacemaker versus Boba Fett. Now, I actually found this kind of interesting because Business Insider came out with a piece about the new HBO Max show Peacemaker, and we're actually reviewing it on the podcast.
Hmm.
And it said that Peacemaker has become the most popular show on streaming according to Parrot Analytics. And according to Parrot Analytics data, it says that it's almost 70 times more in demand than the average streaming series. 70 times. So that's pretty big. It has surpassed Netflix's hit fantasy series The Witcher and Disney Plus's Star Wars Book of Boba Fett in terms of like demand. Parrot Analytics is looking at all the data that they're collecting from all these different streaming services. They're like, wow, the viewership of Peacemaker, especially like when an episode is released, is way higher than any of these other shows. So HBO Max also reached like record subscriber numbers last year. They have nearly 74 million worldwide users with an average user value of about $11 a person. And they took in 3.5 billion in subscription revenue in the last quarter of 2021, which was the biggest growth of any AT&T property. I'm just going to pop this up here. So this is the article that kind of details all this stuff. And as you can see, they have this graph here, which shows that HBO Max's growth has been beating out Netflix and Disney Plus, mostly due to the strength of their original series. So have you been watching the Book of Boba Fett at all?
I have. Yep. I've been keeping up with both series.
So what are your thoughts on the two shows?
Well, look, if you're going to ask me which one am I enjoying more, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I don't know. That means different things, very different things to different people these days. But I enjoy many things about Star Wars quite a bit. But I like Peacemaker better. It's just in terms of a well-made series, I think head and shoulders above as a self-contained product. And I don't dislike the Book of Boba Fett. I know that's been pretty divisive as far as fan reactions to it. I think it's pretty good. Somewhere between just okay and pretty good, which by Disney Star Wars standards, I think is vaulting over the bar pretty well. But man, Matt, going back to the success of HBO Max, I really enjoyed the Suicide Squad. And I know you did too. And I did not expect to either. I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. I like what James Gunn did with Guardians of the Galaxy a lot. If he brings that sensibility to this, maybe it'll be okay. And I got through it. And the next day I watched it again because I just enjoyed it so much. It was such a delightful surprise. And so when I saw that they were going to do a Peacemaker series, I was in from the moment they ran the teaser trailers months ago. And so far, I have not been disappointed. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you had told me that a DC show starring a D-list comic book character would beat out a Star Wars TV show, I'd have said you were crazy. At least if you had told me this like 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like Star Wars has damaged its brand so much.
Mm-hmm.
Through like the movies, but also through like the corporate culture and how they treat their fans and some of their stars and stuff like that, that people like are almost actively rooting for it to fail. And though I like the 2 seasons of Mandalorian, I've been finding the Book of Boba Fett to be a wildly uneven show.
Yeah.
Like the character's not as cool as he used to be. They kind of like use the strange narrative structure where they were flashbacking to his time outside of the Sarlacc pit in the wilds of Tatooine with the Sand People, which just wasn't all that interesting of a story. At least I didn't think so. And all the crime lord stuff was to me like the interesting part of that show because the criminal underworld in Star Wars is actually like really fascinating. but they never really focused enough on it for my taste. And then in this previous episode, they literally stopped the story to give us the premiere of The Mandalorian season 3.
Right.
Yeah, like Boba Fett didn't show up at all in this episode.
And a lot of people feel it was the best episode of the 5 released so far, and I'm pretty sure I agree with them.
Yeah, because it had nothing to do with Boba Fett. But the surprising thing to me was, so like when Peacemaker came out, I had really enjoyed James Gunn's take on the Suicide Squad, which surprised me because I was not a fan of the first one, the David Ayers one.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. But James Gunn has this uncanny knack of taking like these ridiculous characters from DC Comics, the most obscure characters you can think of, and turning them into fascinating, multi-faceted, interesting characters. Even if they're on screen for like a few seconds and get killed, you're like, oh yeah, I like that guy. I actually listed The Suicide Squad as one of the best movies of 2021, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I was, when I heard that Peacemaker was coming out, I was like, okay, I'm interested in checking this out. And it was kind of funny because James Gunn actually came up with the idea while he was like locked down for COVID. And he just called up the people at HBO and was like, hey, I got this idea to do this. Is that cool? And they're just like, yeah. So like he wrote every episode in the series. It's like an 8-hour movie. He directed the first 3 episodes. And I was surprised, like when I sat down and watched the first 3 episodes, at how funny and engaging that show was. And it's like your typical like James Gunn style of humor where he'll take a mundane thing and blow it up. Like their arguments over like, do you pronounce it Berenstein Bears or Berenstein Bears? And there's like a whole like 2-minute scene of them arguing like how do you pronounce it? So like I really enjoyed that aspect to it. But apparently the show is doing so well that a season 2 is almost guaranteed.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow, like I wonder where they will go with the season 2 and if James Gunn will write every episode again. I mean, like I certainly hope so. And John Cena's killing it in this show, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from listening to your guys' reviews, Vader, who's a big pro wrestling fan, talks about what a divergence from the John Cena wrestling character this performance is. And to me, that's probably a really good move for him career-wise to show off that range, to be able to play this like hyper masculine character who's also got this really tortured side to him because of his past and how he was brought up, and to fit all of that into this quirky comedic vehicle. Like, yeah, he's done a really, really impressive job of keeping all that held together in a way that's kept me engaged and my wife too, to talk about why I think one of the reasons HBOMax is doing so well. Look, I love HBOMax. I think HBO's been the best producer of television consistently for 20 years. And so just the back catalog of all its shows, that's a great selling point to me. And then, they've added the Warner film catalog. Access to all of that is great. My daughter, a little bit too old for Sesame Street by the time HBO acquired it, but I know we were watching that with her when she was a kid. So there's stuff for people with young kids on there. And then, you have shows like this that my wife and I are both watching Book of Boba Fett together and watching Peacemaker. And I can tell with Boba Fett, she's kind of dragged into it and fallen asleep by the end of the episode. And Peacemaker, she's excited to watch the next one and ready for it to come out. I'm sure John Cena not wearing too much clothing in a lot of the scenes contributes to that. But, again, broad audience appeal. That's how you make the green.
Yeah, well, what's funny is my fiance Jude, she's not a Star Wars fan. She never has been. So she refuses to watch Book of Boba Fett with me. But she'll watch the crap out of Peacemaker.
Yeah,
and it's not because
something for everybody.
It's not because she thinks John Cena is attractive or anything like that. It's because she thinks the show is genuinely funny and she enjoys watching it. Which is also kind of funny because she's not really huge on comic book movies either. it's interesting though, because Disney has probably an even bigger library than Warner does in terms of like, movies and stuff that they can showcase on their streaming channel. But HBO Max has had such growth over the course of the past year, and they were kind of widely criticized for their strategy of doing like the same day movie releases on their streaming service as they did in the theaters for all of 2021, where they took like their big movie releases and just popped them out on HBO Max. But I personally love that because like I was like, I'm going to sit here with my big ass expensive TV in the comfort of my own home and watch these things. Like I wouldn't have gone and seen The Matrix 4 in the theater, I don't think. But I sat down and watched it at home because it was part of my package. Same thing for like Mortal Kombat and a bunch of other like HBO releases over the course of the last year. And I actually think that strategy was brilliant for them because it got people signing up for that stuff because they wanted to see these things without having to go to the theater.
Yeah, it's a tremendous value add that does feel like it's proactively responding to changes in consumer preferences. Because to your point, and Matrix 4 is a great example, at least half a dozen movies I have watched first run films on HBO Max that there is a 0% chance I would have paid to go see in a movie theater, whether there was a receding global pandemic or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's been a big boon to them as well. Just to go back to the Peacemaker Suicide Squad bit too, I also feel like throughout its cinematic run, the DCEU has had this kind of Simpsons did it problem with Marvel, where it always felt like Marvel beat them to the punch, and then they were stuck trying to create the dollar store version of what we'd already seen from Marvel. And I love the way both Suicide Squad and Peacemaker are totally forging their own path, which is what I thought was a smart way for DC to play it, to just kind of lean into the fact that they are home to a lot of these exceptionally strange, idiosyncratic characters and stories. And if you can just hit the proper balance that Marvel did in its own way with its characters, of just like a real, like a twinge of self-awareness, but still ultimately kind of taking itself seriously in an internally consistent way, you can get something that's really fun and charming. And I think I don't know if that's just unique to a James Gunn thing or whether or not they can replicate that and extend it out into the non-Batman DC universe. But on those two properties, I thought it's worked really well.
I mean, I honestly think they should bring James Gunn in to just oversee the entire DCEU because what he's been doing with Peacemaker, like he made Batmite canon.
Yes.
Like in the last episode, they talk about Batmite and you're like, did they just bring Batmite into the DCEU? And if you look at the Suicide Squad and how he dealt with all these like D-list and Z-list characters that exist in DC Comics and made them interesting and fast, like what was Nathan Fillion's the one with the detachable arms? I mean, like there was so much cool stuff that he did with those characters because they were ridiculous, and I just think that like if they let him kind of like plan stuff out with the big guns, fans would flock back to it in droves because I think he could kind of walk that fine line between like the Snyder, what do you call it, pretentiousness. Of like like the gods among men type superheroes, and the mundane, stupid, silly, ridiculous stuff, and balance them out perfectly. Like I would love to see a James Gunn directed Batman. In fact, I don't know if you ever saw Brightburn, but Brightburn is like a Superman origin story if Superman became evil. And it's a great play on like the Superman origin story, and it was really good, and it was written and produced by James Gunn. So definitely recommend checking that out. But yeah, I would love to see James Gunn, kind of take over the DCEU. In fact, I think they're doing something similar with Dune, where Denis Villeneuve is producing a show about the Bene Gesserit, on HBO Max. So like they're gonna do that. But that was one movie I did go see in the theaters was Dune. But then I came home and watched it on HBO Max anyway.